Our last panel of the day will address how innovation can help evergreen companies keep growing. Nicole Mouskondis will be our moderator. Nicole is co-CEO of Nicholas & Company. She has more than 25 years of experience in family business, supply chain, food service distribution, hospitality, logistics, and regulatory agencies. Joining Nicole for the panel are Josh England, Ryan Young, and Taylor Woodbury. Josh England is president of CR England, a Salt Lake City-based transportation provider founded in 1920. With 7,000 employees, it's one of the nation's largest trucking companies, and it has been ranked as Utah's 5th largest private employer, excuse me. Important here. Josh has a bachelor's degree in business management from the University of Utah and an MBA from the University of Notre Dame. Ryan Young is the president and CEO of Young Electric Sign Company, also known as Yesco. The company, founded by his great-grandfather, Thomas Young, celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2020. Ryan works closely with his grandfather, father, uncles, and other members of the 4th generation, directing operations and providing leadership for the company's nearly 1,700 employees. Ryan is also a U of U alum with a bachelor's degree in economics and an MBA from the Eccles School. Taylor Woodbury serves as COO of the Woodbury Corporation, and as well as being on the company's board of directors. He's active in the real estate development and investment activities of Woodbury Corporation, and has directly overseen over $500 million of ground-up commercial development. Please welcome this distinguished panel to the stage.
All right. Well, it is such an honor to be here with such distinguished and respected family business owners in this community whose families have gone back literally generations with mine. What's remarkable about all of the panelists up here right now is that every single one of them are part of G4, the 4th generation. And that inspires me because as part of the 3rd generation, I'm selfishly excited to listen to you and your insights, thinking about what my kids might be thinking as we try to transition to the 4th generation in our business. So every single one of these companies have built companies to last. And it's amazing to think about the first panel that we had, founders, 1st generation, who got a start at their business as evergreen companies, who were deliberate and intentional enough to begin with the 7 Ps in place. You don't get to the 4th generation without having a founder and continuing generations of people in the family who are committed to the 7 Ps. Now, our founders may not have had the framework in place, but certainly it was intuitive to them to build a company to last. They knew that it was right to do what was right simply because it was right. So they had those 7 Ps in place intuitively, but they didn't necessarily have the official framework. It's fair to say that going into the 4th generation, these gentlemen are carrying on the torch that their founders laid for them. So I'd like to actually read the definition from Evergreen companies of what pragmatic innovation means. This is one of the 7 Ps that we're going to talk about on this panel. Embracing a continuous improvement process built around taking capital-efficient, calculated risks to innovate creatively within constraints, adding value to the organization and the communities in which we serve. So I'd like to start by asking each of you if you could talk briefly about what pragmatic innovation means to you and how it really looks in your organizations and if it's played a role in your success. Go ahead.
I think this is one of the real advantages of private companies, is the ability to be nimble and not be pressured by external pressures as it relates to innovation. You know, you can jump on opportunities super fast. You can fail fast if it's not the right opportunity. I think you can also be patient, with slower developing opportunities. So, we have 102 years of history. I think of a few examples of innovation that I think illustrate some of those advantages of being private. There was a time, middle of last century, where the main freight lanes that we were hauling freight in, the railroads came in and disrupted those markets, and they could haul freight for cheaper, right? And so what we were able to do is, this was a big threat to our business. And what we did very quickly was adopted we were the first in the country to offer coast-to-coast 72-hour service. This is back before the interstate highway system, so it was very hard to do. A lot of it was on two-lane highways across the country, and accomplish that expedited service in a way that the rails couldn't touch. And then, later we partnered with the rails. That's a big part of our business now. I'd say another episode that comes to mind is in the 90s. There was a time where there was way more demand for our services than we had trucks to provide it. And so rather than turn down our customers, continue to turn down our customers, the idea was, well, let's find a solution for them, and there may be opportunity for us in this. And so we built these relationships with many small carriers, other trucking companies, and those small trucking companies didn't have a national reach in terms of sales, so they couldn't, get into these Fortune 500 shippers that are our customers. And conversely, these Fortune 500 manufacturers, they didn't want to talk to tens of thousands of small trucking companies to get their freight moved. So we said we can make a market there, and so we became freight brokers. And then my brother and I we were in college. And my dad and his brothers, who were running the company at the time, they said, hey, why don't you guys, they had us kind of just roaming around the company, learning different parts of it. And they said, hey, why don't you guys think of ways that we could expand and innovate? And so we wrote a business plan on how we could then further serve these small carriers through financing services. And so we started this entity up that provides financing. It provides tire discounts, fuel discounts, maintenance discounts. This has now become the biggest business unit we have and the most successful. And so, to trust these college kids to go out and do that and give them that opportunity and then to invest in it and fund it, I think it shows the ability to be nimble and to grow.
Well, and what I love the most about multi-generational family business is just hearing these stories. And you talk about what happened to your company in the 1990s. You were probably a little kid then, and the storytelling lives on. So you're bred, it's in your DNA to know about how to pivot, how to innovate, how to be successful from generation to generation, having lived through difficult times and knowing that you'll get through it on the other end. So I love hearing these stories.
Let me just add one more thing to that story. Yeah. So we wrote that business plan, my brother and I, and they said, okay, yeah, go ahead and start this business. And so we hired our younger brother to start it, and he took it and founded it, and it's become a great thing. So
that's awesome. Thank you. Ryan?
So first of all, I want to say thanks to Dave, well, both Daves. I hadn't really known anything about the Tugboat Institute or Evergreen before this symposium was scheduled, and it's really cool and gratifying to see that different minds have grappled with some of the same questions surrounding capitalism, our economy, and those things, and coalesced around values that are really quite similar, about how to run an enterprise the right way. So, when you're in a capital, so oftentimes when you're in a private company, there are capital constraints that you don't have if you, have a sugar rush of venture capital or private equity, and that certainly has been our situation from day one. We've never had, huge windfalls of capital with which to make investments. And so, when you talk about pragmatic innovation, I think about those times of necessity in a business that really breeds the innovation. And one such example in our organization is we've quickly discovered over the last few decades that service and repair business was a much more stable revenue stream than the manufacturing business that's subject to business cycles. And so we've been trying to grow that, organically for many years. And we've been a Western region company, so basically just the western half of the United States. And at a certain point, we had to grapple with the question: in order to grow, we need to expand eastward. How do we do that with no capital? How do we do that without selling equity, without taking on loads of debt? And the innovation that came out of that was my cousin and a few executives at our company said, why don't we consider a franchise model? Which was not even something, we're not Burger King, we're not McDonald's, but we decided to pursue it a little further and partner with independent owner-operators of lighting and electrical companies or sign companies in the eastern United States. And this franchise business has become really one of the gems. It's not huge still; it's less than 10 years old, but it's become one of the crown jewels in our company. And I think back, and were it not for those capital constraints we had, would we have gone this route and stumbled into, for lack of a better word, this type of a business that's become so rewarding? So when I think of pragmatic innovation, I think of some of the innovation that comes by virtue of necessity or constraints.
Yeah, they say necessity is the mother of invention, right? And I think we've all been through that. I think, interestingly enough, Mike, who's your uncle, correct?
Yeah, uncle.
I think he talked to us about franchise models, because part of our business is franchise Burger King's, Subway, Dairy Queen, Panda Express, et cetera. So I think they had a conversation about what a franchise model might look like. So it's nice to know, again, all these like-minded companies, we do get together, we inspire one another, we brainstorm, and that's part of the beauty of being in a family-owned business in a community that's so close. So thank you for that. Taylor, what have you got to say about pragmatic innovation?
Yeah, it's interesting. And first, let me just say, the Young family and the England family, we just admire these guys so much, and it's such a privilege for me to be on the stage with them here today. But, my great-grandfather really got his big break in real estate right after the Great Depression. And what had happened was Zions Bank had this huge portfolio of properties that nobody wanted to touch. It was loans that had been given back. And my great-grandfather formed this partnership with them to come in and kind of help them work through this portfolio of properties. And I think it was through that a little bit that we really developed our kind of core philosophy of expert management and expert management of real estate. And my great-grandfather said, and I don't know if this is his quote, I've never figured out who said it originally if it wasn't him, but he said, that which man fails to alter for the better, time will alter for the worse. And so we've kind of had this philosophy when it comes to our real estate portfolio and trying to, thrive on expert management. And as we've gone through the generations, what we've found is, for us, keeping with this core philosophy of expert real estate management, you could take that in so many different directions. And where my grandfather was doing a lot of brokerage work and doing some commercial property management, in the second generation, we moved that into retail and became Kmart developers, and we're doing, and managing, retail centers around the country. And then the third generation moved into, office and, other asset classes. And an interesting thing is they tried to move into hospitality and found that, they'd done a number of hotels, but they couldn't find anybody who would manage the hotel the way that was kind of consistent with the way that we approached real estate management, really being focused on costs and being focused on our people and, how properties look. And so it wasn't until, one of my uncles came back from school and decided he wanted to get into actually managing, hospitality, and took the family culture and into the hospitality industry, that we started having a lot of success managing hotels. And just in the last 10 years, we've added, I can't remember now, I think over 3,000 apartment units, and we're getting into multifamily management. So, there's so many opportunities to expand horizontally, and vertically in your business when you search for them, if you can kind of take your core philosophies that you've developed over the years into those industries.
So what I love about this Evergreen concept of pragmatic innovation is the thought that we're adding value to the communities in which we serve. And both Daves talked a little bit about this a little bit earlier. Woodbury is now partnering with the Greek community. My husband is Greek, and we're getting ready to do a huge project to help commemorate and the legacy of the Greek immigrants who came to Salt Lake City. So again, like-minded companies doing good things, not just for their own organization, their own team members, but for the communities in which we serve, which I'm so proud to be a part of. So I'm part of the third generation, and we have the fantastic stigma of being the generation that screws everything up. If you've followed family business, you know that to be true. And trust me, going into the business, we heard that every single day, don't screw it up. Probably that wasn't the word that was used, but don't screw it up for the purposes of today. So as part of the third generation, there's this old rule that was commonly shared. It's 30-13-3. 30% of businesses make it from the first generation to the second generation, 13 after the second generation, and only 3 and less than 3 into the third generation and beyond. We kind of know now that that's a little bit misleading because a lot of family businesses do in fact continue on in some way, shape, or form. It just might look a little bit different than what the founder originally intended. It might even be in generation 4, generation 5, a completely different industry. So I'm kind of wondering from the panel today, can you talk about, you've talked about innovations that have been created through necessity, right? A crisis situation or a pivot time or moment. But what specifically is different? Is anything different from what the foundation of your founders, the industry that you started in? Is your company primarily, is it fundamentally different? Or are those additional revenue channels, different vertically integrated business opportunities? Is it just sort of channels of differentiation? Or is your business primarily different than what it started? Our company started out actually as a salvage company. And now we're a broadline distributor serving restaurants, schools, nursing homes, hotels in the Intermountain West. And we still primarily do that, but we don't really think of ourselves as a food service distributor first. We do think of ourselves as a people-first company, and we think of ourselves as a logistics company and a technology company, more so than it's not really about the food. The food is kind of just sort of what we do, but it's not who we are. So could you talk a little bit about whether, the evolution of your business from generation to generation, does it look primarily the same as it did in the beginning? And were those changes that have been made out of necessity, is that one thing that's happened to ensure transition to the next generation?
We've learned from a lot of screw-ups over the years, so we look a lot different than we did in 1920. When people think of our business, they think of those big red trucks, beautiful red trucks in my book, and that haul freight. And there's actually, more of that freight being hauled by other carriers. We're like a travel agent for the freight, and so that's a difference in our core business, or in addition to our core business. I'd say another angle on this is, we have become much more explicit about our purpose. And our mission and core values, and I think you have to be today. I think, have you ever sat down and done the math, of your time, how much of your time is spent at work, particularly during your working life? What percent of time is spent at work? And it's a high percentage, right? And so you want to do that with people you enjoy and engaged in a cause you believe in and doing something at a world-class level. And that's not just us that feels that way, that's our whole teams, right? And so we have become much more explicit about our purpose and our core values, our mission. And I'll highlight a couple of our core values. One is we're community-driven. We are an essential service to the community. We try to build pride among our team that you're providing a service that community relies upon. The world kind of woke up to this a little bit during COVID. How gratifying was it, for truck drivers to see, signs on the freeway, thank you, for delivering what we need, what we live on. And for a lot of people, that was kind of the first time, because of those shortages, that people realized that, right? So another angle on community-driven is, traditionally, our philanthropy, we have really kept it quiet and been very private with it. And we kind of had this epiphany a few years ago that, first of all, we were an inch deep and a mile wide. Let's focus on something and really make a difference. And secondly, if we talk about it, if we engage people in it, not only do they get engaged, but those efforts get multiplied. They jump on and they help with it, right? So we started our one initiative. We're united in the fight against childhood hunger. So for every load we haul, we feed a child, make a donation through partner food banks. And so our team, they watch this, these flipboards, these counters that real time count how many kids we've fed collectively. that engages them, right? They also jump on board and it multiplies, because then through these food drives and through their donations, they get on board, and this provides this adds to the sense of purpose, right? So we're community driven. I'd say another core value that we talk about a lot is we are family, and it's a play on the Sister Sledge song, which we have a lot of fun with. It's also a play on our family ownership. But really what we mean by we are family is that we are a CR England family, not the England family, right? We are a family, CR England family business. And so it's this experiment of, can you help 7,000 people feel engaged, feel connected as a family? And so we do a lot of things to try to accomplish that. And we're seeing this is much different than what we used to do in the ways we try to accomplish that. And it's working, right? It's so exciting to see that work. And I'd say a few of the things we try to do. We try to be very intentional about creating authentic relationships between coworkers. And some of that's even facilitated by a little bit of organization. Everybody gets a daily check-in. There are we are family commitments that everybody makes every week, and where they decide their own commitment on some way they're going to get authentic with somebody that maybe wouldn't have otherwise, and we try to reduce the vertical divides, right? So, for instance, all of our executives and owners have commercial driver's licenses and get out and pull freight, right? And of course, our drivers love that. Hey, you're not asking us to do anything you're not willing to do. And so we mix with them in truck stops and in our terminals. And I was excited. Last week, somebody sent me a picture where one of our executives was on a family trip, and he's in the car with his family, and he drives by this Family Dollar location, one of our customers. He sees one of our drivers unloading the truck, and he asks his family, "Is it okay if I stop and I help him unload?" So he stops while his family's in the car, and he's unloading. Somebody snaps a picture and sent it to me. And what I loved about it also was our driver was wearing his "We Are Family" shirt that day. So it was almost like this was staged, but I know it wasn't. So anyway, so we are much more explicit about our mission, our purpose, our core values.
I love that, and what I love to hear about that is, again, the first panel of founders and first generation starting their businesses as evergreen businesses with this framework that they have to springboard off of, and now we find ourselves in third and fourth generation being the stewards of this legacy and memorializing and almost doubling down on, and having to articulate what were those founding principles that got us to this point. And the fact that you're carrying on this legacy is very cool to see. We do the same thing. We see our trucks on the road, and if they're stopped and they're delivering to a restaurant, we will always, if we have time, stop over and say hello to our driver and thank the driver. And these are the stories. Your kids are watching this, your other team members are watching this, the community is watching this, and I think it fosters longevity and legacy. So, Brian, how about you?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's tough as you grow to grow and maintain that feel of a family business, especially with England. I mean, with 7,000 employees, I mean, it takes a ton of effort, I'm sure, and I know you guys do a great job with that. But when you ask this question about evolution, the first thing that came to my mind is we probably haven't evolved nearly enough. So you look at some of the things we do, and they probably haven't changed much in 100 years. But evolution for us is actually really closely tied with one of our core values, which is the value of stewardship. And so when we come into the company, we're taught that our purpose is to grab hold of a project or anything really, and work our careers to make the company a better place than when we started, so that our kids or any employee that comes our way afterwards will benefit from our efforts. And so, example that he'd be embarrassed if we shared it, but so my uncle, who's the outgoing CEO, spent a good chunk of his career trying to deleverage the company, trying to get it out of debt. And so he finally accomplished his goal, and so Yesco's functionally debt-free after all his efforts. And so coming in as a fourth generation, you talk about the evolution. I mean, our evolution manifests itself in the stewardship of those who came before us, handing us an organization that's healthier than the one they inherited. And we hope, to evolve in a way that's going to be the same way, so that our kids grandkids, our employees that we consider fifth generation will come into the company and really benefit from the work we're doing.
Well, it's incredible that you have that gratitude and appreciation for generations before, and I think that's the thing that's going to make you successful going into the next generation. I do have a funny story about your company. So again, you know, going back and forth, we have business in Las Vegas also, so I find myself quite often on the plane with his uncle going back and forth from Salt Lake to Las Vegas. And when the Wynn was built, for those of you who have seen the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas, it's Wynn and then there's this period at the end of Wynn. And it is intentional, it's Wynn period. I don't know if this folklore lives on in your company or not, but I remember Mike saying, oh my gosh, this job is like, it's crazy. And these signs, by the way, that you see all over the place, they're huge. I mean, you just can't, we see them from far away, but these are just massive, incredible works of art. And Mr. Wynn, you guys had like a deadline of like grand opening, and they were, you know, there were cameras all over the place and everything, and there was like 4 hours to get it unveiled. I'm probably messing up some of the details, but that period was off in his mind, right? Like he saw this, he's such a perfectionist, and that period was off. And he said, take it down. And within like hours, literally, I mean, your team must have just been sweating bullets, had to move this period, which by the way, is probably as big as this entire stage. I mean, it's humongous. You know, I don't know, 40 feet by, I don't know how big, but, and they accomplished that because they just had this incredible focus on doing what the customer, you know, exceeding their expectations. So you have this incredible legacy that I'm sure you're very proud of. And we think about technology, by the way. You know, we're in the third generation, fourth generation. I don't know that we have such an appreciation for, you talk about the sacrifice that generations before made, but they didn't have technology, they didn't have anything. And so we are all very different companies just by nature of the fact that, you know, we live in a technical age now and they didn't. Taylor, what's that look like for your company?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting, and I think we're unique, but largely because real estate is unique from some of the other operating businesses that we've talked about today. I mean, if you think about it, the asset ownership in a real estate company can be totally divorced from the management of a real estate. And so, you know, for me, I have right now, so there's 5 members of the third generation in our company. They're still all 100% active in the business, come in every day when they're not traveling, to be fair. And there's 15 of us in the fourth generation that all have active jobs, you know, in the company. I'm working with second cousins right now. I'm working with 3 of my siblings. And then apart from the active ones, we have, you know, I've actually lost count, but our last family reunion, we had just about 220 people, you know, there, and we do those every 3 years. We try to bring the whole family together. And basically all those cousins are investors at the same time, right? So they all have ownership, you know, fractional shares of ownership in projects, you know, all over the Wasatch Front, all over the country. And I think one of the biggest things for us, I mean, my uncle jokes all the time, every time we pull off some, you know, crazy feat of investor reporting, he's like, well, of course you could do that. You have Excel, you know, like, and I know that sounds like really, really rudimentary, but we've been able to take it much further from there. I mean, we've put in place processes and procedures and adopted technology because, you know, more and more just to report to our own family, you know, we have to take on the characteristics of, you know, a large like public company almost. I mean, I have, you know, 200 plus investors that are family members, let alone the hundreds of investors we have that are non-family members at this point. And so, you know, we got into private equity, and I know, I'm sorry too, after hearing how bad private equity is. We got into private equity, but I've decided you guys are talking about a different type of private equity than what we do, right? Like, we like private equity because it helps us diversify our risk in real estate assets. And, you know, we want to put our own money in, and we're putting significant amounts of our own capital in all these deals. But we just realized, hey, we can really diversify and get a lot more coverage in real estate if we, you know, open it up to investors. But they're all passive, and hopefully we're not succumbing to the evils of private equity that have been discussed here today. But all of that stuff has just helped us become better managers of money and better stewards of, you know, all of our family members, you know, net worth. And, you know, I think that for us in this generation, I mean, we often talk that we are the generation that have had to look at diversified capital sourcing. But what it's really helped us do is be better managers of people's money and be more sophisticated and have more professional face to the management of those assets.
So I think I cut you off. You were going to say something about that period at the end of the win. I'm going to ask you the next question because I think it's related. When we talk about technology advances, and again, how far we've all come since the 1920s, since the 1930s, I can't imagine how you would get a sign up that high. I mean, the advances in equipment and technology have got to be massive. What do you think your organization has done to innovate in a way that not only differentiates you from the competition, but that has assured that there's successful transition from generation to generation? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Thanks. And the way you get up there is helicopter in that case.
Okay.
So I think innovation can be a little bit tough for the older you get. I think the easier it is to just kind of sit back and ride the wave of your legacy. So I think there is peril in these evergreen companies that are mature to become complacent. And so as I thought about this question, one of the things I thought about, looking back at the things that some might find innovative that we have done, they all kind of come from the same source, at least in our organization, and that is that just being able to listen to customers, hear what they're asking for, and having the flexibility to be able to change in order to meet their demands. So speaking of Las Vegas, for years and years, we would have these casino customers asking us to, hey, it'd be great if we could change this message. And changeable messages are not anything new. They've been on Times Square, ticker tapes, and for 100 years. But their requests were to do something more dynamic. And so, as a result of these requests, we found ourselves diving into LED technology and video screens, which we didn't think we would ever be doing. But we ended up building this technology company and building it up till it was a large portion of our business. And so I think the takeaway from that is that the complacency can be very dangerous in these mature companies, but their ideas right in front of you. If you take the time to really listen to your customers, to the marketplace, and then you have an organization that's flexible enough to not say no every time, but to look at some of these opportunities as people gifting you with an idea that's going to be your next big thing.
Those are those calculated risks that we're
Right.
talking about. And luckily, there's a foundation, you've got a reputation that supports innovation and allows you to take those risks. So that's fantastic. Josh?
As far as differentiation, one thing we really try to focus on is, I guess another one of our core values is safe and on time every time. That's really the name of the game in our industry. It's what differentiates us from our competitors. On-time service is vital in today's supply chain. But then also being nimble and finding solutions for customers when they need something, even that's out of the ordinary. So we've spec'd all different kinds of equipment, for different customers who had different requirements, temperature needs, and so on. And so safe and on time every time is our key differentiator.
So, what I think is interesting is just hearing from these panelists, there's this deliberate focus on culture at every step of the way, and I think that it's no surprise as to why you're still in business and still thriving, and why you're better than your competition. So, Taylor?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think has been a key to our family culture for years is education. I mean, my great-grandfather never went to college, only had a high school education, and he always, I think, kind of regretted that and almost felt like he wasn't accomplished enough because he didn't get that. So he drove his kids to get a lot of education, and that's kind of just trickled down. And among my generation, I think almost everybody, I think there's just one or two that don't have graduate degrees, and some of us have multiple. I have 3 graduate degrees on top of, just all the other training and stuff I've done over the years in the industry. And the thing too is my great grandfather was a huge proponent of getting involved in trade associations and really just getting out and being a part of the community. And I remember every trip I've taken since I can remember, we have to stop at real estate projects and see what's happening in other countries and other states. I mean, oh, there's a cool project here. There's a cool office building. Let's go look at this. I mean, like we're going at the same time we're going to museums. We're stopping and looking at the retail center that was right next door and trying to see it and looking at the beautiful young signs that, are up and down those. I mean, no joke. Every time we go to Vegas, we're just in awe of, everything that we see, and we're trying to figure out ways to incorporate it.
We call it photophilia.
Yeah, that's right. But it's, we really consider ourselves to be just kind of students of, not only what people have to teach in institutions, but also just what we can see in the world. And then we try to take that back and incorporate that in Utah. And there's so many things that I think we have done first, that we were the first ones to try to incorporate into our businesses. And, then you go to a place like University Mall, which has been, an asset in my family since the late 60s. And we're in our fourth major redevelopment of that. And we're constantly trying to push the envelope and do something new and learn about how we could do mixed use better and how we can incorporate office and residential and make entertainment venues. So I really feel like, by always having this kind of hunger and insatiable need to be out trying to learn things new, it hopefully keeps us, so that we don't atrophy.
So I'm going to stay with you for a minute because I liked what you were talking about. From the time you were a kid, you were, your parents were role modeling the way with you, and stopping to see things and showing you. And we always told our kids, you eat, sleep, breathe, die the business with us. There's no escape. So can you talk a little bit about what going from the third generation to the fourth generation looked like? Did you have a formalized, transition period? Did you have specific education within the business? There's all this informal stuff that you did. Obviously, you're very accomplished academically as well.
Yeah,
but
it's funny, and I laugh at this, and I may get in trouble with my family for divulging this story, but I think it's fair. So we, so I had been back from school for about 3 years, and my uncle, who'd been president of the company for 30 plus years at that point, and really just brought us into the modern age in so many ways, got called to be a mission president for the LDS Church, right? And in a way, like the uncle who took over as president after him joked and said, "Hey, I think God's really doing all of our succession planning for us," and that really was true because there was no formal plan in place. Like when that came, there wasn't like, "Oh, this is who the next person in line is," or "This is how this is going to work," right? And so it was a little bit of a wake-up call, but what it did is it caused us, so at that point in time, 5 members of the fourth generation got put on the company board, and it really kicked off what ended up being pretty much a 10-year process of coming up with a succession plan. And it's a big organization, lots of different things we have to transition. So, and we looked out and we couldn't find anybody like us. So we basically had to create this from scratch, and we had to figure out how to transition the management of the management company. We had to figure out how to transition, some of the, other industries that we're in and companies that we have, how to transition those. And we just, right before the pandemic, kind of knocked off the last big piece. The last thing we haven't solved is, trying to get to the point where, the fourth generation that has smaller balance sheets and the third generation can be guarantors on construction loans. But it caused us, we kind of had this moment where like, oh no, we've really got to figure this out because people aren't going to live forever, or they might, God might have other plans for them beyond just, going on missions. So we gotta get into this and figure it out. And it's been a really good process that we've had to go through very collaboratively. Because like I said, I still have, I have 20 family members that are still active, coming in every day, have vital roles in our company, and trying to figure out how all of them fit together. And it's been a really fun process just to continue to collaborate with them and come up with a structure that works for us.
And that you have to think out of the box, right? To include all of those family members to make sure that they still have a vital role in the organization and that they're adding value.
And if I could just say, and that they feel important. And the thing I will say is I really believe that anybody who gets kind of a make-work job knows it. Like, it doesn't matter how good you try to craft that. Like, you have to actually have vital roles in places where people can find the fulfillment to be there, for family members and non-family members to keep them, right? And so when you're talking about transition of a company, we've had to be very deliberate in the way that we create roles to make sure that everybody has something that they're going to feel and find meaning in, for the rest of their careers. Because not everybody can be, president or be in an administrative position. And so it's been a challenge, but I really think to a large extent we've accomplished it. And at this point, the fourth generation, day to day is doing, the bulk of the work, but still working closely with the third generation and being guided and directed by them.
And that's so in alignment with what Dave Peterson talked about earlier today, with that, employees needing to feel fulfilled, and especially family members, right? I think a lot of people think that family members have it differently, or maybe better in some cases, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, having access to jazz tickets goes a long way, and well, it did until maybe this season. We'll see, I guess, but eventually you got to find fulfillment in what you're doing at work too.
How about you? How did transition work from third generation to your generation?
So we had a pretty formal handover actually last summer. So it's still pretty fresh.
You're a newbie.
Yeah, I'm a newbie. I'll let you know how it goes. But I will say that for the first 80 years of the company's history, it probably was a lot like a lot of companies in that it was just seat of the pants. And it wasn't until about 25 years ago that we started getting really intentional with company succession and handover and how this looks. And for our company, we have a very large family. So I think I'm among 25 cousins. Some of them, I have a cousin here. Some of them work for the company, and some of them don't. And so part of our transition planning which has been very helpful, is we're set as soon as we're in school and starting to look forward to our careers. We're brought into a day-long seminar and presentation on kind of our company's culture, our ethic, what it is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't for people, and invited to consider, our reasons for wanting a career there and whether or not they're the right reasons. And so we have lots of family members who have looked at the opportunity and said, "No, that's not for me. I'm going to seek fame and fortune elsewhere," and that's okay. But I think having those values formally somewhere, and your ethic and your plan in place, so that you can communicate it very, very early on, not only to family members, but your employees know that this is part of the plan as well, and they feel the security that you feel that this is built to last indefinitely. And so, the succession planning, going forward, hopefully looks similar in that we have, interested people that want to, share our values and make a career of it as a steward, like we are right now.
Thank you. So Josh, you talked a little bit earlier about how you and your brothers had the opportunity to kind of do a startup within your organization. What exactly, that's innovative, I think. I think that is, and it also gives you ownership in the process, because you got to create something, present a business plan, get it funded from your family members. Is that something that you're looking forward to carrying on in the next generation, or how do you see, I guess I'll let you start with, that was how you transitioned into the business, was with this startup within the business, correct?
Yeah, I grew up in and around the business. We joke I may have been conceived in a truck.
Yeah.
So my dad, even while running the business, he kind of would drive part-time. And incidentally, my mom was kind of a pioneer as one of the early female truck drivers, not full-time, but she did it for a while. And she's like all of 5'3", 120 pounds when she's doing this, and not your stereotypical trucker. But anyway, I remember as a small child, I'd go on trips occasionally with my dad trucking. One of them I remember we delivered in San Francisco. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. We deliver in Sacramento area, and we come up to the gate, and there's this big sign. It's just me and him. Big sign that says "No children permitted." And so we get up to the guard gate, and he spots me, and he says, "Hey," and he points to the sign, "No children." So my dad's like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to leave him at the truck stop." So the guy was unrelenting, right? So we turn around, and I can see the wheels turning for my dad, trying to figure out what to do, and finally he says, "Hey, crawl under the mattress in the sleeper." And so I remember doing that delivery while under the mattress in the sleeper. But so that was kind of how life was growing up in and around the business. It was often subject of dinner table conversation. It was certainly every summer I'd be out there while I was in school, doing different jobs, and I got kind of moved around to all different parts of the company so I could learn it from the ground up. My uncle was a key mentor of mine as I continued, into full-time, and so got mentored, got given a lot of opportunities, like the example that I shared about the business plan. I'd say one of the things that I so admire about the previous couple generations is being willing to give us space with each generation, not hanging on and managing it, up into older age. I mean, my grandpa turned it over very early. I mean, he's actually almost 103 years old next week. He still goes to work every day, but he hasn't been involved in the day-to-day for 40 years. He actually, a story for another time, he started a car leasing business in his 80s where he was the repo man, and they have like 800 cars out on lease. But anyway, so
I've heard those stories.
yeah. So, being willing to step aside and give space to the next generation to run it. And there are a lot of ways to do this ownership succession. Our model has been every generation. So we pass ownership down the family tree without buyouts. We do it through estate planning, and then we buy out all but one branch of the family every generation. So we consolidate, ownership and decision making. So that happened 10 years ago into my family, and may happen again with me and my brothers here in another 10 or 20 years. So we plan to continue to give people opportunities, shift them around. I'm getting my the fifth generation is in college and starting, the oldest ones, and so we're trying to give them opportunities to see the business from all sides, and just like we were given that opportunity.
So I think you're underselling that repossession business a little bit, because that's little known, but one of the creative benefits that they put in place is having this leasing program so that their employees, if they can't get to work, if they don't have transportation, they can actually rent a car, or not rent a car, buy a car, lease a car through the organization and have it payroll deducted. That's still in place, correct? I heard that, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that your grandfather once said, nobody sees me coming because I'm old. What are they going to do? I'm going to go repossess their car, and they won't attack me.
These are drivers are all over the country, and so often, if they stop working for us, they've got this car, and sometimes, there will be a car that has to be picked up, and so yeah, he used to go in and repo those cars.
Right in the thick of it. But again, I think innovative in that this is how you take care of your employees, how you attract them and how you retain them. What do you see doing differently into the next generation as you think about, maybe you guys have little kids, I don't know how young they are at this point, but certainly with 20 and 25 in your generation, and then it's going to be exponentially bigger in the next generation. You're thinking about that now. What are you thinking about creatively that needs to be done differently to get to the fifth generation?
We have adopted family employment rules in a better way than we used to. So things like separation of family, and this has long been in place, but ownership and employment are two different things. So when you're at work, you're an employee, and you report to a manager, you're accountable to a manager, whether that's a family member or not. There's a traditional hierarchy, all those things, but family employment rules, like we have rules on education, on working elsewhere, those kinds of things that kind of came in place about 10 years ago. So that'll help a lot going forward.
Great. How about you, Ryan?
Well, one of the things I thought about is we're trying to take a page out of the Woodbury's book in terms of education. We've had a lot of respect for all of their advanced education, and it's becoming more and more important in our family. And what's interesting about our business is it's, we sit around a conference table and it's a bunch of MBAs or business management majors, and that's good. That's a great thing. We're in the School of Business, so I don't want to sell it short, but man, we got a diverse needs in terms of backgrounds in education right now. We need software developers, we need engineers, we need, unfortunately, lawyers too. So I'm hoping as we go forward, we can actually kind of create a pool of candidates with a really diverse set of educational experience and even work experience to help kind of bring that talent into the company through the family. So that's a goal we're
Yeah,
working
the war
on.
on talent is real for every industry right now, but I think about how our company started, you know, different categories of products. You know, our produce buyers used to actually be out in the fields, and our meat buyers used to be butchers, and our, you know, cheese buyers used to be cheesemongers, right? Now, you can be a buyer, you should be a buyer in our business, and you don't even have to have touched the product before you have to understand how to work the systems. And so it's a technology-driven thing now, so the talent is really different. And so thinking about what your talent needs are going to be in the future is something that I think is really important. Taylor, how does that look for you into the next generation?
You know, and I want to say, I mean, one of the things I love about being in a family business, I mean, we've had zero turnover in our upper level management in the last 20 years. You know, and think about what you could do if you can have consistency, you know, at that level and helping grow the company. But, you know, with our fifth generation specifically, there's a couple of things. We've tried to be a little bit more deliberate with the fifth generation. And, you know, what we realized was, you know, my grandfather would take me and all of my cousins on trips. And that was how we got to know each other growing up, as we'd go on a cruise or we'd go do something together. And I really have a great relationship with my first cousins because of all these trips we did growing up. But what we realized was, now that we're taking it out to second cousins and third cousins in the fifth generation, a lot of those kind of logical family reunion type opportunities don't come up as organically. And so starting 2 years ago, we started a summer program where we get all the fifth generation that are over 14 and older together. And there's always a fun activity, and then we go into a little bit of education and telling some of the stories like you were talking about from the family business and trying to pass down that culture. We put in place a employment plan, you know, for the fifth generation. And then one of the things that we all wish we had when we were coming into the business that we've now done for the fifth generation is we've spelled out every starting position that's available in the company, the education required for it and experience, and then also what the career trajectory might look like for those fifth generation members. And we did that before they got to college so that they could be hopefully planning. It sounds like a lot like the Family Institute that was mentioned. So we're trying to be a lot more deliberate about helping them understand the opportunities.
I love that, and I knew I would learn a lot from you about what to do, hopefully right, going into the next generation with my kids. So it's been a pleasure to be up here with all of you, and I thank you for your time.